Hello, this is Arun Burathoki reporting for the NB Media Co-op online at nbmediacoop.org. In December, the Migrant Workers Alliance for Change, or MWAC, delivered a letter to Liberal MP Dominic Leblanc calling for permanent residency status for all undocumented workers and temporary migrants in Canada. MWAC is an advocacy organization for migrant workers, including farm workers, caregivers, and current or former international students. CBC reported last October that Ottawa was working on a regularization plan to grant permanent residency status to 500,000 undocumented migrants. However, the details remained vague. Hussan says that MWAC is calling for a response without caps, meaning there are no limits on how many people can apply without application requirements that rely on others. The advocacy group plans to post the regularization program on the agenda of the three-day federal cabinet retreat held by Prime Minister Trudeau from January 23rd to 25th. Here's what Syed Hussan has to say.
The Migrant Workers Alliance for Change is a membership-led body of migrant farm workers, current and former international students, undocumented people, domestic workers, and fishery workers. And we function sort of like a democratic union. So we support the self-organization of migrants to collectively take action on issues that they identify, using strategies and tactics that they've identified.
On December 16th, migrant workers and organizers from Migrant Workers Alliance for Change visited the SEDIAC office of Liberal MP Dominic Leblanc to deliver a letter asking him to support permanent residency status for all in Canada. Can you tell us why your organization is asking for permanent residency status for everyone in Canada?
So the December 16 action was taking place across the country. There were rallies that were held in Toronto, Montreal, etc. And so we are part of a cross-country movement of migrant organizations in almost every province, working to demand equal rights and protections for everyone. Now, it is not possible to have basic labor rights if you don't have permanent resident status. It's not possible to get access to healthcare or be with your family or be able to speak up when you're being exploited at work or abused, or if you're facing, sexual abuse or so your ability to protect yourselves is dependent on your immigration status for many, many people, whether because it's true or because of the way that the systems work. So what we are calling for is a very simple thing. Everyone in the country must have the same rights. And the only way that's possible is if everyone has permanent resident status.
Right. Your organization stated that there are 1.7 million migrants in Canada, including 500,000 undocumented people and their families. Can you tell us, why did they become undocumented in the first place? And does this mean that Canada's immigration policies are flawed?
Each year, 1.2 million temporary permits are issued in Canada. These are study permits, work permits, refugee permits, or refugee claimant permits. The vast majority of those people will not be able to get permanent residency. There will come a day when they'll not be able to renew their permits. On that day, many people have to make this difficult choice. Either they return to a country where they may be facing discrimination or repression, lack of economic opportunities, climate change, or they may be leaving family, community that they've built in this country. They can either do that or they can stay. And when they stay, they don't have the basic rights. They don't have identification documents. They live in daily fear of detention and deportation. This isn't a choice, it's a crisis. And yet, at least 500,000 people have been forced to live here without papers. Not only is this a crisis for them, it's a crisis for all of us. When so many people are outside of labor protections, public health, education, the basic umbrella of rights, then we are all affected. So the Canada's immigration policy is effectively a revolving door immigration system through which people are brought in, abused, exploited, and tossed out. We need a single tier immigration system where everyone comes in the country with the same rights, and that means permanent resident status for everyone in the future. And we need to ensure permanent resident status for everyone that is here now, including students, workers, refugees, and undocumented people and their families.
What are some of the challenges that undocumented people face in Canada? Like you said, are they subject to exploitation only, but also deportation?
Every basic right that you can think of. So your ability to speak up when you're being exploited at work, going to school, being with your family, being able to travel, all of those rights are taken away. And you live in daily fear of detention and deportation. On Christmas Day, a migrant who was in an immigration detention center in Surrey in BC was died. We don't know how. Today, we found out that 1 year ago, an immigration detainee who died in the Laval prison in Quebec committed suicide. Today is also the day that after 7 years of a death in an Ontario prison of an immigration detainee, a coroner's inquest is starting. So at every turn, we see that people are being exploited and dying as a result of immigration policies that take away their ability to defend themselves.
So do you believe that all the undocumented and migrants in Canada will receive permanent residency someday?
The federal cabinet, which is Prime Minister Trudeau and all of the ministers, are meeting in Hamilton on January 23rd, so next Monday, 1 week from today. And we are pushing to put regularization on the agenda of that meeting. If there is collective agreement among the ministers on that day, then we can expect them to pass a regularization program within a few weeks from that meeting. So right now is a critical juncture. We have a historic opportunity that has not been present at this scale, not just in Canada, but in North America and most of the world, for a massive inclusive regularization program that gives permanent resident status to all undocumented people and their families. So this week, next week, the days that we are going into it will decide whether we win permanent resident status or not.
So what are those regulation programs that you are talking about? Like, can you give some details?
A regularization program is one through which undocumented people are given permanent resident status.
Okay.
What we are calling for is a program without caps. That means there are no limits on how many people can apply, without requirements that require, without application requirements that rely on other people. So no letter from an employer, no English testing requirements, no educational requirements, no requirements that force you to get a document from someone else, and without exclusions such as inadmissibility. So the Canadian immigration system has a series of inadmissibilities.
You said before that Canada's immigration system it's a kind of like a revolving door. What are the problems that you have seen within the immigration system of Canada, and what can be done to make it better?
The fundamental issue, I mean, there are other issues arise from this fundamental issue, but the fundamental issue is that it's a system of temporary migration. People come here as students, as workers, paying tens of thousands of dollars, being exploited at work, with the hope and a promise of permanent resident status, but most people will not get it, right? 1.2 million temporary permits each year. There's less than 500,000 permanent resident spots, right? And that includes from people outside the country, which means 2 out of every 3 people will not get it. So then once you have a temporary system, all other exploitation happens from there, whether it is access to education, access to healthcare, being with your family, labor exploitation, sexual exploitation, racism, discrimination. Each of these are a result of the exclusionary immigration policies. Now, on top of that, labor laws also exclude migrants from basic protection. So, for example, your minimum wage, overtime, hours of work. These migrant workers in agriculture are excluded from all of these protections. Health and safety protections, having a break, being able to go to the bathroom in a field, you're all excluded. If you look at international students, no access to provincial healthcare. When you look at people who are on refugee claimants who, there's no real right of appeal in the immigration system. So there are many other flaws that are built upon the fact that it's a temporary system.
To talk about international students, your organization also have mentioned that they should be granted permanent residency. And from you, I understood because they pay thousands of dollars, and they also don't have access to provincial healthcare and other sectors. But if Canada decides to grant all the international students permanent residency, will it not create a loophole for maybe some groups trying to settle down here easily, or how will it work? How do you envision?
In the year 2000, 23 years ago, there were 60,000 work permits issued in Canada.
Right.
In the year 2023, they were closer to 600,000, right? There has been this massive expansion. This idea of temporary immigration is very new. It used to be that everyone who came here did so with permanent residency. So we simply want a system of, if we talk about who can take advantage of the system, right now, who's taking advantage? Employers, universities, healthcare providers. The rich are getting richer, right? Particularly with international students, this is a massive transfer of wealth from the middle classes of the global south to the institutions of the global north, right? People are coming here paying huge sums of money, not because they want the education, but because they want the access to permanent residency. They want the access to jobs. They want the access to a better quality of life. And we have to ask ourselves, why is it that the quality of life is better, quote unquote, here than it is from places we come from, right? What, in part, it's because all of that money is being sucked away from the south to the north, right? So this is a system of labor and money being stolen here. And then when you fall sick here, when you get injured here, when you can't get permanent resident status, you're sent back. Right. So the only people taking advantage of this are the super rich.
Can you tell us the case of Abu Hina Mustafa, who came from Bangladesh to study? I think he's in Thunder Bay, Ontario. Are there similar cases in New Brunswick or other provinces within Canada?
Absolutely. I mean, there are former international students or current international students who simply cannot pay tuition because, for a myriad of reasons. Their parents lose income, they lose income, they fall sick, or they, for some other reason, drop out of school because they have a health crisis. And at that point, if they become undocumented or they have to leave the country. So many former international students are becoming undocumented or are undocumented already.
Right. do you want to talk about the case of Abu Hina Mustafa? Like, what's the update? Like, is he staying here in Canada, or what's the
His
situation?
deportation was stopped after thousands of people spoke up and organized. He was about to face deportation
Okay.
in January, and 7 hours before he was to be removed, the deportation was stopped.
Mm-hmm.
He actually has a valid permanent residence application, which isn't true for many other people, but he does have one
Mm-hmm.
that he filed for over 18 months ago, and he's just waiting for a response. So, immigration applications are in a backlog and people are being deported. We see this with so many international students who are postgraduate work permit holders who put in applications for express entry,
Mm-hmm.
but but either there are no draws or the draws are for points that are so high that people can't qualify, and now their work permits are expiring or have expired,
Yeah.
and they're becoming undocumented. Some are transitioned to tourist visas, but those who don't become undocumented.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us like how removal order works in Canada, since some temporary migrants and undocumented workers work without a work permit? Because, like you said, there are like backlogs, and then they have to work because, who can survive without working, right? So like when they face deportation, like how does it work, and what can be done to protect their rights?
It's a complicated system and it depends on your previous immigration status. So there's not a straightforward,
Mhm.
this is how it works. But I think if anyone is facing a crisis, they should call our hotlines. We have a dedicated hotline. You can find them on migrantworkersalliance.org
Mhm.
by sector. If you're a care worker, you're an international student, a farm worker, a fisheries worker, we can call our um, hotlines and detail the specific issues, and then somebody will call you back and work with you on your particular case. But at the end of the day, the most important thing is for people to collectivize.
Okay.
The most important thing is for people to find others who are being impacted like them and
Mhm.
fight back, whether it's against an employer, an institution, or immigration policy. Collective action is the only way forward.
Mhm. Mhm. So what are the solutions that you think are appropriate, to fix not just the loopholes within the immigration system, but also to protect existing and future undocumented workers and temporary migrants in Canada?
What we need right now is permanent resident status for everyone. And we have a historic opportunity to win that in the next few months. We are
Mhm.
talking right now, everyone needs to be signing the petition at statusforall.ca, making a phone call to the government. Now is the time to take action.
Mhm. Okay. Okay. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Of course, thank you for having me. Take care.
Thank you. That was Syed Hussan, Executive Director of Migrant Workers Alliance for Change. Hussan stressed the importance of permanent residency for undocumented workers and temporary migrants in Canada, and argued that having fundamental labor rights is impossible if one doesn't have a permanent resident status. The federal government responded to questions from the NB Media Co-op with an emailed statement. The statement referred to various government efforts, including a range of existing pathways to be expanded or adjusted to increase opportunities to transition from temporary to permanent residence. You can read the full statement with the article on our website, nbmediacoop.org, along with all our latest articles. For the NB Media Co-op, I'm Arun Gurathoki.